Hey beautiful people, my name is Kristen. Thanks for stopping by my channel. Today I actually have some book reviews that are my February reviews, and I know it's almost the end of March, but we just had that time in life when you're working excessively long hours, and I had a couple of trips, and I also had to have the work ready so that I could be gone. One of those kind of things where you're double timing it and then you're gone. So I was doing a lot of reading. Well, not a lot of reading. I was still reading, but not quite as much even as my normal. But I wanted to share it because I think I still have some valid input if you're thinking about any of these books. And as always, I will hold them up. You can scroll along. I am going to present them in order of least enjoyed to most enjoyed. But it's a little bit of everything as far as categories. The first is my nonfiction book that I read in February. That was On Air. I got this as a Christmas gift from my son. It is a full, detailed account of the history of NPR, National Public Radio, and the kind of beginnings of it, how it came about, all the way to the current struggles for funding and trying to get it to still be a good source of information, or at least entertainment, if not news anymore. Media. So in the 90s, I was doing a lot of listening to NPR, following along with the stories. I loved the little personal stories, the Lake Woebegons and the All Things Considered, all those kind of things where they would grab these stories from around the country. And I just found that to be very enjoyable, particularly as I was commuting as a very young 20-something-year-old. So Steve Oney, he wrote this kind of documentary. It does feel in parts less entertaining just because it goes into everything. So there are certain points of it that I think were more interesting to me, and I think for anybody who would read it, you would find certain sections more interesting than other sections based on what was happening. At a lot of points, there was a lot of big personalities that were really driving it. And particularly in the beginning, before I was even listening to it, it went through a time where it was run by a lot of big personality women. And you would think that'd be great. And at first I got pretty excited, hey, here's something really, in the 70s, 80s that is woman-led. But they didn't support women. They only supported themselves, the powerful women, if that makes sense. So it was kind of that Mean Girls club. And so to me, that was not as enjoyable to read as about how they were trying to develop and be more cutting edge. And then I also didn't enjoy necessarily when things would get really political and I just feel like when that was the focus, it just took away from trying to tell the story. Ideally, a news source is going to share news with you as factually and as unbiased to allow us to make our own conclusions. And it's just so interesting nowadays I love the news sources that will align several different news sources, and we kind of know which ones are left-leaning or right-leaning, and look at the titles and see how the exact same story is told so differently, right? So to me, I get super jazzed when I try to come across something that seems like it's just trying to tell the human story about what people experienced, what did they feel, what did they witness, and then let us make the conclusions of what that means. So anyway, if you have interest in National Public Radio, in the history of radio itself, into following the media slant of news throughout time, this is very good, and it documents kind of those major news stories that happened from the late 70s till now. So I don't think it's for everybody, but if that seems interesting, it is well written to follow along and learn about those things. I then would share with you Sophie's World. This had actually been suggested to me by several of my comments in the years past. It is a fiction story about a little girl who starts receiving mysterious letters from an older man, which would be really creepy, right? Except for this has a more magical kind of secret garden-ish kind of vibe to it. And it's basically all disguising the fact that this is somebody's kind of documenting research paper on the history of philosophy. It goes back to the very, very ancients and goes to the modern day and breaks down every single major philosopher throughout history and is forming it into, hey, we're sharing it with Sophie, we're sharing it with educating the next generation. But it's kind of like several pages of, here is the actual backstory of this philosophy, of this philosopher, and then there'll be like a line or whatever about how Sophie receives it. So you know, you just have to be in the kind of the place and the mood to be really, the story is cute, but it's a total backdrop to just reading about the history of philosophy. Then I did light reading the Apothecary Diaries. This is the second one in the series, and the first one really was kind of setting up the character. It was very heavy into jumping around all over the place. This is this, and this is this, and this is what's going on. And now this is really getting to the story. So this young girl who is brilliant with natural remedies, with understanding medicines and holistic living, and then some things start going sideways. Like people are actually doing some poisoning, doing some crimes, and this actually reads very clever and goes through these different kind of dramas, these different kind of personalities, talks a lot about, you know, the families who were in power and the royalty and all. It's a good soap opera. As I get farther in the series, I can't share as many details without starting to spoiler some of the beginning stuff, but highly recommend this. Really engaging. Going to look for the animation series and start watching it as well. And then my top book that I read in the month of February was I Must Betray You, Ruta Sepetys. So this is the historical fiction based on real history of Romania, and talking about some young adults who are trying to, live life, but then also being part of the rebellion, the revolution, needing to try to, avoid the violence, refugee, all this kind of things. And as the title suggests, you have to really, really be on guard for who you can even trust, whether it's your neighbor or even family. The communists will try to bribe family to even spy on family or their workplace or whatnot. And so just really great, really learned so much about that part of history, and really well done in the fictitious story that you get very moved and very tied to the characters and wanting to know what happens to them. So those are my reviews for February. So I hope that you got inspired to read something, even if it's not one of these. Sometimes just hearing about one reminds me, oh, I wanted to read one that reminds me of, right? If that happened, leave me a comment. Let me know what it was, because maybe I want to read it too. Or if you've read any of these or want to read them now, also leave me a comment. Hope that you are doing well. Happy reading, y'all. Take care.